Hello there. Welcome to the sixth episode of the Camerata Cast. My name is Andres Marquez, director of the Camerata, and today I have joining me two wonderful artists. One from my side of the pond in California, and the other from. Were you located near London, Lizzie?
Yeah, near London.
Oh, that's awesome. Why don't you take some time to introduce yourselves?
All right, all right, I'll start. Hey, my name's LeeAnn. I'm the one from California, and I've been a musician for almost 20 years now. I'm uh, kind of had a very wild ride so far in the music industry, and since the pandemic started, as most of us know, music has taken a shift to mostly online space. So now I run an LGBT music history Instagram account called at LGBT_music, where I post about LGBT music icons and their contributions to every music genre and decade.
Wow.
Radical. All right. How about you, Lizzie?
I'm Lizzie. I'm known online as Too Small for You, and I'm a digital freelance artist illustrator from the UK. I specialise in comics and concept art, but I also do some editorial work, and I like to sort of specialise in the subjects of sci-fi, horror, and LGBT themes.
Awesome. Awesome. So today's topics are going to be a bit more, I suppose, heavy, a bit more gravity to what we're going to be speaking of today. Um, and of course, we will still be focusing on art, as is the wont of the Camerata. But I also do want to take some time to have some conversations regarding issues that are of some are pretty significant in today's world. And I hope that everybody enjoying or everybody watching will still enjoy our conversation. And I hope that this will spark some conversation amongst our listeners. So thank you all. Uh, I'll start with Leanne. What are your feelings regarding the future in general? Do you feel any hope for, I guess, the vagueness that is the future?
Right. Well, I feel like the pandemic has really been a wake-up call for like the local music scene, local artist scene, whatever art you partake in, because specifically in the music scene, we're losing a lot of performance spaces left and right. So I think when live music comes back, I don't say if, I say when live
Hmm.
music comes back, we're gonna have to, I guess, kind of rethink and restructure what success means for your band or artistry, post pandemic world. And I think music, art, any sort of creative outlet is probably going to be better than ever because I think we'll all have very specific feelings and a lot of shared trauma coming out of the pandemic. And I think these feelings will really push for something great, creatively.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I dig that. Regarding performance spaces, another huge aspect of live music, which is, I suppose, my artistic forte. Performance spaces closing, but as well as that, they're closing because there aren't many performances anymore, any safe
Right.
ones at least. And that is something that I've just recently learned is actually a huge, I suppose, percentage. It's a huge part of a lot of working musicians' income. That's where a
Hmm.
majority of a lot of musicians' revenue comes from. And it's really, I don't want to say disheartening because I love seeing musicians, find more creative ways to, I suppose, eke out their niche.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it feels very disillusioning, I suppose, to see that, as artists, we have to resort to, I suppose, crafty ways of being able to, support ourselves off of our art.
Right.
It disillusioned is a good word for it. The fact that that folks have to just constantly kind of, you know scheme into just being able to support themselves off of what they want to do, their passion work.
Mm.
Lizzie, what are your feelings on the future regarding art and, I suppose, just life in general?
Yeah, well, I think put quite nicely, I guess, in that the pandemic's definitely put all this into perspective. Like beforehand, I was quite carefree and I wasn't really worried about like what the future had in store. But it's really been like a wake up call in terms of like how relevant my career would be if the world ended. I don't know. That's a bit drastic, obviously. Like that's worst case scenario. But my brain has kind of been swinging between like, oh, it's either certain doom or like realistically a struggle, but hopefully a comfortable life. I don't know. I feel like hope is the main thing I can have in order to, keep going through with the art. I feel like in a world spiraling out like this one, any art form is needed more than ever. So I guess that gives us a reason to be sticking around and making what we make.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I totally agree. Um, yeah, so I'm happy to hear that there is like a base level of hope. I spend a lot of time on Instagram, just running the Camerata page, and I every 5 minutes there is an entirely different mood regarding current events that I'm just subjected to.
Yeah.
There will be like, oh, beautiful story about this heartwarming encounter between these two people shows hope, and then just 5 minutes later, it's like 17 memes about why you should be depressed about the state of the world,
Yeah,
and
honestly.
uh, yeah. How do you y'all feel about social media? Do you feel like that exacerbates current issues? It's tough to really make a living as an artist without social media at the moment. So it's kind of a
Mhm.
necessary evil. How do y'all feel about having to interact with it often?
Well, social media is kind of my job, so I can't escape it. But I kind of see like a professionalism. Well, because I have several accounts that I run, so I guess if I'm looking at my LGBT music account, it's all like history based and stuff like that, and then I go to my personal account and it's just a bunch of like memes and headassery and just people being like real dumb on there. I kind of find the kind of find the memes kind of comforting because it's like, oh yeah, we're all kind of thinking the same thing, and we all have like I love those memes are like very specific situations.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You know what I'm talking about? Um, Like, I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, there was, like, a lot of, like, you're running out your house, and then you have to, like you're like, "Damn, I forgot my mask," and you have to, like, run back in, and you're like, that's, like, something you never would've, like, thought you'd be saying, like, a year ago.
Oh yeah.
Um, so, yeah, there's a lot of that, and then also, we've all been seeing the infographics are, like, reasons why blah, 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 you shouldn't be doing blah, 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 you know?
Hmm.
So, it's a good mix. Um I simply can't escape social media, unfortunately, but, there's always a comfort and there's always, uh, I guess, a time to learn about new things with social media.
Right. How about
Yeah,
yourself, Lizzie?
I can definitely like agree with a lot of that. In some way, it's very comforting to know that there's a community of people out there who like agree with you, and we're all living through this like completely crazy thing. But on the other hand, like especially like during the sort of middle of the pandemic, or like because over here we had like a 3 month lockdown, so like the only thing we could do was go get food or go for a walk. And I sat with like on Instagram all day, and it was just like it kind of got to the point where it was like quite damaging in a way because there was just so much like overinflated information, and a lot of it like wasn't real or like was exaggerated. And I feel like in some ways that was definitely not helpful. Like it helps run down your motivation more than anything. But I guess at times like this, when I'm more active and doing other things, it's more comforting than anything else.
Yeah. Ooh, sorry, I got a lot of feedback from your end.
Sorry.
Anyways, yeah, social media, it's pretty much two sides of one coin. I will say, um, I've gotten to meet virtually, of course. I've gotten to meet some very wonderful people that I do not think I would have ever gotten to, come in contact with through social media. And Lizzie, you are definitely one of those people. Like I met LeeAnn through a band that we were
Oh
in,
right.
like, some 7, 8 years ago almost.
Yeah, a while
Uh,
ago.
but I don't even know how I met Lizzie, how I came in contact with you, but I am sure that it was just through Instagram somehow.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it went down that way. I'm pretty sure it's got a message from you, and that's where it all began.
This wonderful journey. So another question regarding, I suppose, the future. That's going to be kind of a theme within this episode. Um, I feel that, and this is going to be my own personal interpolation. I feel that a lot of the issues that people are facing, whether they are artists, whether they primarily work in the service industry, a lot of the issues that most people are facing nowadays um, comes from very systemic roots within our current socioeconomic system that are sort of that they just weren't really built to benefit the most amount of people in the in the most efficient way. So I wanted to ask y'all, what sort of changes do you feel need to be addressed on all levels of society in order for us to create, I suppose, a more equitable and more efficient way of just conducting our lives?
Right.
I'll start with
Um,
LeeAnn. We have like a 5 second pause before somebody
yeah.
answers.
Sorry,
we
trying to be
gotta we
polite.
gotta
No,
think
no,
about
it's
it.
okay.
Um, well, first of all, oof. So, you know, I think I think class structures need to be addressed. I think the way our government handles things needs to be addressed. Racial injustices. I think people have been really able to take a step back and look at what's really going on in the world. Especially, we talked about social media with the use of social media and a lot of people losing their jobs. They kind of have a lot more time now
Hmm.
to look at that and really let that sit, because before it's we're just always just very busy with work and we didn't really have time to look at or learn about a lot of things. And I hope people have learned a lot so far. I know a lot of people out there want to make some serious change, myself included. I'm actually very curious as to what Lizzie's answer is gonna be, because I know you live closer to London.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd like to know your answer to this.
There's a lot. There's a lot of things. I'll try and keep it like fairly condensed, but I think the main thing, kind of very similar to you, is the law system and how it's arranged for like black people and people of color is like disgusting. Frankly, like that whole situation is it doesn't benefit anyone in that like minority whatsoever. And even in the UK, there's like fundamental issues with the treatment of black people and other people of color. So like that definitely stands out as something that needs to change by either like defunding the police or giving law enforcers proper mental health training. And I guess like as far as America goes, I don't know loads and loads, but I try my best to keep up with like American politics as well. I guess like things like gun laws, because there's no way that a policeman or a policewoman should be reaching for a gun as a first port of call. Like there's something so
Right.
clearly wrong when you see that situation happening, and like that's just on the racial and like policing side of things. Like there's so much like the inclusion of like trans laws to protect them, like to protect trans people. I could literally go on forever. I literally have a list right here that's so long right now.
Yeah, so I'll focus in on one aspect of this conversation currently, policing. I know that there are many opinions on the matter regarding how, I suppose, law enforcement should be handled. Um, and of course, it's a very touchy subject because I don't think anybody in this country, at least, and I don't think anybody in England has really lived in a state where there wasn't a very pronounced form of law enforcement that people were aware of.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
so I can understand why it's a difficult concept to wrap your head around. Like defund the police. How are we supposed to get around that? That's something I still hear people talking about to this day, even uh, about 7, 8 months after this became a talking point after the murder of George Floyd. And I think that this is something that definitely needs more discourse because there are actual, veritable experiments that have been done, small scale, of course, but experiments done in terms of having, townships, having neighborhoods that no longer have police as we know it, and
Right.
that's basically where defunding it comes from. You're not getting rid of law enforcement, you're just spreading out the duties of police into
Hmm.
different subsections of employed people.
Yeah, like reallocating the, I guess, the burdens of, different things that go on. Like, I learned that the police are not really trained to handle like mental crisis, and you probably shouldn't call the police if you see someone going through a mental crisis.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, no,
And we don't really know who to call, and I think that's a really big issue. And I don't think I think a lot of people would just think for call the police for any reason, but they don't know that they're not really trained to do some of the things that we think they should be trained to do. And um, reallocating the burden to like other positions, I think would really help. And like you said, there have been several smaller experiments, and I'm guessing that they work, right, Andres?
It's actually been sort of a case by case basis sort of thing. I don't remember what specific locations these experiments were performed in,
Right.
but there definitely were cases where towns fared much better than other towns under similar circumstances. However, just through general statistics, it's been shown that if you allocate resources less towards your policing force and more towards community building resources such as education, such as our rehabilitation programs, um, stuff like that. It's been shown that crime does decrease. It's not a matter of, increasing policing. It's a
Yeah.
matter of increasing, um, I suppose, people's ability to really, grow out of a circle of crime, I guess.
Right.
for definite.
I couldn't find a good phrase for that. But yeah, so I'm not sure how policing is performed in England as compared to the United States, but there definitely is a lot of mismanagement when it comes to police training.
For sure.
Um, I Yeah, and this is kind of, I suppose, hearsay, but I've read a lot of stories about police departments that don't. They barely even train their officers with weapons. That's a very scary thing. You're giving people who train for about 18 months in total to become police officers. You're giving these people weapons, uh, firearms no less. And I
Hmm.
just wanted to ask Lizzie if you had any insight into how policing is performed on your side of the ocean.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't really know how long they train for, but I know that it is a lot different because obviously we don't have the right to bear firearms here, so that obviously eliminates a lot of the immediate danger. And so for that reason, you don't often see like police officers carrying around guns or anything like that. They do a step by step measure where they do try to if they see like someone having like a mental crisis, they're supposed to interact with them, and then they use a taser. That's like their unless someone physically draws a weapon on them and their life is at risk, like immediately in that moment, it's taser, and that's the best they can do. But that still doesn't stop the fact there clearly is instances of police brutality and like racial problems. It's still systemic and it's still built in over here. It's just not as apparent and not quite as violent and obvious as it is in America.
Hmm. Yeah, I understand that. Um, yeah, again, I have very little insight into anything regarding European law, but regarding racial, I suppose, racial profiling and racial sensitivity in America, there are countless amounts of studies and, I suppose, anecdotal stories as well, just detailing how pervasive police or pervasive over policing is when it comes to people of color, minorities, including Hispanic folks and Black folks. It's become apparent that it's almost scientific fact that Black people and Hispanic people will be more closely monitored by the police, which of course leads to more arrests, leads to more confrontations that don't necessarily have to happen, and that is something that's just become so ingrained within our police system that it's a cycle that I don't understand how it will be broken unless we actually reallocate funding from policing towards resources that will better uh, fulfill community needs.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I don't really have much to add. That was very well put.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so hope you don't mind a quick pivot from our conversation. I did want to, move on. I do want to ask, since this is, since the Camerata mainly revolves around the creative work, uh, how do you both feel that creative workers can better change our world to be more equitable and inclusive and sustainable? Um, I feel that personally, I feel that art does a lot in terms of helping people realize that there are issues and helping people kind of digest in a sort of metaphoric way the sorts of things that are, occurring in the world that need to change. But I find it very hard to wrap my head around the fact, or not the fact, but the opinion that, art simply can just, change things for the better in a more tangible way.
Let's have Lizzie go first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, personally, I just think it's all about like using your art, like whatever that may be, as an opportunity to share your voice with others. If you have like an online following, like that's already a great platform, or if you create work that others will see or hear. So like it could even be as subtle as like if I'm doing an editorial illustration, making sure all my characters are diverse. You've got to use all those things to make sure that your opinions are known, and using that to inform and educate those who need it and make your work like as inclusive as possible. I feel like you have a responsibility like as an artist to do those things. Like you have that platform and you're lucky and fortunate enough to be able to show people your work, and therefore you might as well take the opportunity to do something meaningful with it.
That's a beautiful sort of stance to take right there. I really do. That's something I didn't even consider, the duty of an artist, the responsibility to, you know, how do you say, to, I guess, provide a good example for people how representation, should be conducted.
All right. I have a question for Lizzie. In your art, do you represent like people, or I don't think I've ever seen your art before.
That's fine.
I simply would love to look it up.
um do you mind rephrasing the question? Sorry, I'm a little bit lost.
I was asking, in your art, do you, I guess, portray like people, or what kind of things do you portray in your art?
So like yeah, it's mostly people, and like I sort of do a lot of like comic work, and those are like my main projects. I sort of do everything else as like side work while I work on my comic work, but it normally almost always centers around LGBT themes, and also looking into like politics and the idea of capitalism, and literally like rather on brand for this podcast, what it means for our future. So a lot of stuff looking at like the idea of corporations buying out our entire world, what happens after the apocalypse, all these sorts of ideas of like how terrible the world could go,
Yeah,
and also just representing like different people and telling their stories. I enjoy that. I enjoy telling stories.
got it.
Hmm.
Awesome. Um, let's see. So the question was, how do you feel creative workers can better change our world to be more equitable, inclusive, and sustainable, right?
Yeah,
All
and by creative workers, I don't just mean what we might portray as like artists, people who do illustrative work or music. Creative workers can also include people who do, design, architecture, people who program apps and who program software, anything I suppose that requires a, I suppose, majority of your work being devoted towards creating new forms uh, through, yeah. I lost my train of thought. Hopefully, you understand what I meant before I kind of
No,
train wrecked
yeah,
there.
I got it. I personally think teamwork makes the dream work. There are plenty of ways for creative workers that can better change our world, such as, specifically, I'm talking like music industry type situations, like working with people who are outside of our friend groups is one way. There are plenty of diverse groups out there that you can find, like on Facebook and LinkedIn and all sorts of social media places. And they kind of also act as directories for creative spaces. So if you needed someone to do this, maybe reach out to one of those groups. And I feel like that's one way creative workers can be more inclusive and
Mhm.
equitable if they, kind of work outside of their friend groups. Because um, I think you just need to kind of diversify people you work with.
I get that.
Hmm.
That's pretty. That's pretty solid. I want to ask y'all. We typically have a section of our podcast where we shout out different artists and creatives that are inspiring us at the moment. And I wanted to ask you two if there are any artists in your community or that you're, aware of, um, or even people who don't necessarily do creative work, quote unquote, if they're inspiring you currently through their efforts to make a positive change for uh, their future and for the future of others, um, on whatever scale. Um,
The
You got it.
silence. I'm happy to
Uh,
go.
yeah, go
yes.
for it.
Okay, sweet. Um, so like a guy I'm really close friends with, his name is Gabe, and he does a lot of like really beautiful watercolor art, and a lot of it is very heavy. Like I feel like my work has quite like subtle hints to some of these things that I'm talking about, whereas his work it like tackles the big stuff, and it's a lot of things about like queerness, feminism, and like particularly like global warming issues. He kind of looks at like the destruction of nature and stuff like that, and it's super powerful. And I guess it kind of like proves to me that other artists are like striving to make a serious change, and that encourages me so much, to be honest. Like he's a really great guy, and like he's so like committed to his work, and also to like I guess just making a change with it. Like that's something that really inspires me.
I'm down with that.
Awesome. Um, so these past few months, I've had the privilege of working as a comms director for my friend that I've known since middle school. She ran for city council in Downey. Her name's Alexandria Contreras, and I feel like she's really someone that a lot of people look up to for change in our hometown, Downey, California.
Hmm.
Um, we really worked on fighting a freeway expansion, which is really wild. I never thought I'd ever do that. The freeway expansion would have took out over 200 homes, and we really fought against it, and we're still gonna continue fighting against it. And she has a lot of ideas for making a city better, and I really see her as like a positive change for a better future. And you can follow her at Alex for Downey on Instagram if you do care to do so.
Yeah, I'll check her out.
Do you mind if
Um,
I
I
quickly give Gabe's thing a shout out? I realised I completely forgot to put that in.
oh yeah, no worries. Please do, please
Cheers,
do.
thank you. It's at sorry it's Gabe.
Sorry, it's Gabe.
Yep.
Oh my
Love that.
god.
I want to shout out a friend of mine who I am I'll explain it, I suppose. A friend of mine, Soka Ni, believe that's how you pronounce her name. She was the head of two locally based organizations in Long Beach that both did some incredible work for the communities, for that community. One of them was the Long Beach Environmental Alliance, a super cool group of folks that held beach cleanups and that did lobbying for local environmental legislation. Uh, and another group called the Food Finders LBC that would basically just run from, restaurants and different, you know, food-based businesses and take all their food that they're about to throw out and then give it to homeless shelters and to food banks and stuff like that, which I feel is something that just needs to happen way more often because there is a huge amount of food waste that goes on a regular basis in America and across the world. And I feel like that sort of organization, the work that they do, is extremely inspiring. Not expiring. But yeah, Soka Ni, I believe she is not any longer leading the Long Beach Environmental Alliance, but I do believe she still works with the Food Finders LBC. So big shout out to her. Thank you for all the wonderful work you do in the Long Beach area. Um, yeah. Before we close this out, I do want to thank you both for joining on this conversation. Um,
Thank you
it's
as
it's
well.
amazing. Oh, it's amazing getting to speak with y'all, and it's amazing getting to hear your thoughts regarding art and regarding the future, regarding the world. Um, yeah, it's a privilege and an honor to be able to have conversations like these. And before we close this out, I do also want to ask if there are any, artists, musicians, not necessarily, making, big extraordinary statements about the world, but just people whose work you're enjoying at the moment. We'll start out with Lizzie.
So I'm really enjoying the photography work of Fen Shields at the moment. They're a non-binary photographer, and they look at different topics, including gender and neurodivergency, and it's just really interesting and really beautifully portrayed. You can find them on Instagram at Fen Photo, I think. And I'm also jamming real hard to an very small Australian metal band called Ocean Grove at the moment. I really love their music. It's very again relevant to this podcast. It's all about like the future, and oh no, it's all ruined and Blade Runner basically. So yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. How about you, LeeAnn?
Well, I just got my Spotify Wrapped yesterday.
Oh.
So I'm revisiting some music that I was really into this year. I guess a specific artist who I feel like should have got, you know, nominated for at least one Grammy is Rina Sawayama.
Hmm.
She's a pop artist. I believe she's from the UK. I can double check on that really quick though. But she writes some powerful stuff, and a lot of it is just like discourse on um, the things that we kind of go through in life. I think my favorite song is Excess, which kind of like deals with capitalism and the destructions it takes on a person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think she's very important, and I think we should all listen to Rina Sawayama.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
check out her work. That sounds right up my alley when it comes to music.
yeah.
I want to give a big ol' shout out to my friend Drew, who works this really cool, suppose multimedia production sort of work is what he does. He does a lot of films, like cool short films, and he also has this zine. I suppose how do you describe a zine? It's basically like a really usually a small form independently printed and published magazine, and he does a whole bunch of this work, and it's always super cool to see just the amount of creative work that he's doing. As well as balancing a job and just kind of like going through that sort of daily emotion. I don't know. I find his work really inspiring, and I did want to shout him out. And in terms of music, I've also been listening to MF Doom a lot.
Ooh.
Definitely not, local when it comes to, the music world, but I still think he's incredibly inspiring musician. One of my favorite rap artists, and one of my favorite artists in general when it comes to music. Yeah, give him a listen.
Awesome.
And yeah, that will wrap it up. Thank you both again for coming on the show, and I hope y'all have a wonderful day.
Awesome. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
very
much for
much.
having us.
No worries. This is Andres Marquez, and I hope everybody out there is also having a wonderful day. Um, keep yourselves hopeful for the future. We can work together, and we can solve even the greatest of problems with our combined strength and ingenuity. Adios.